Hey guys, here I am again. We're going to do a lecture on cults and brainwashing. I love this. I wish we were in class, but it's pretty straightforward. And here we go. Okay, when I talk about cults, let me get my pen on. They're right down here. And what the point of this slide is that as you go from religions to denominations to sects to cults, that it gets more and more narrow. It's like what you can get away with. Up here is kind of loosey-goosey. We'll allow for a lot of things. Here, there's no deviation. And so when I talk about cults, I'm going to give this definition. Now, I know it's kind of long, but see, considered to be false. Well, who considers it false? Most people. So that's the extremism part. And then there's always a charismatic leader, and it seems like he's exploitative. So those are the two kind of hallmarks to me of a cult. You got this charismatic leader, and then, he's teaching false teachings, false prophet, and that's why people are so concerned about it. Okay, this is a quote from Frank Zappa. The only difference between a cult and a religion is the amount of real estate they own. As soon as you get big enough, then you're not a cult anymore. Brainwashing is the second term I wanted to bring in because it directly relates to cults and this false prophet idea. So I'm teaching you something new and I'm going to destroy your old beliefs and replace them with mine. So that's to me the definition of brainwashing. But in a way, everything is brainwashing because I'm going through RCIA, as far as Catholicism, they call it formation, but everything is formation. And so it just depends upon which formation you come from because brainwashing came from the Chinese. And it's like, yeah, but when you get people out of brainwashing camps, what do? You replace their brainwashed ideas with your preferred ideas, which is the same thing as brainwashing. Okay, so I have these 5 tactics. I'm going to go through them one at a time, so don't worry, you don't have to write them all down right now, but you have a leader, and then you have this thing, which I call cocooning. You cocoon the person. This is the way you brainwash. You control the information they receive, make them do something really extreme, and then get them to escalate up and up and up for you. And so I'm going to go through these one at a time and give specific examples from different cults, and hopefully this will make it a lot more clear. Okay, so tactic number one is usually there's a charismatic leader, and I'm going to talk about different leaders that throughout history. I don't know why I pluralized it there, but here's Jim Jones right here, Sun Young Moon. This is David Koresh, Marshall Applewhite, Charles Manson. Okay, usually they have this charisma about them, and part of the charisma is that they make themselves a king. It's like, look at me, and you're going to serve me, so I'm in this position of power. So they're an ultimate authority figure. Now, besides just being an ultimate authority figure, a lot of times they deify themselves. What does that mean? They make themselves into a god. They say they're Jesus or they have special knowledge about another world. And so this is why people are drawn to them because people are looking for that. So David Koresh, if the Bible is true, then I'm Christ. Jim Jones claimed to be the reincarnation of Jesus. He claimed to be the reincarnation of a lot of things, but okay, I'm Jesus. So if the person is Jesus, all of a sudden they got this ultimate authority. Sun Young Moon, I love this picture of him and his wife right here. And he says, I'm the Savior, returning Lord, true parent, second coming of Christ. So when you put yourself in this deified position, then all of a sudden, the followers kind of fall in line. Now, Sun Young Moon, I have this quote in class. I sometimes show it. Am I foolish or insignificant, or am I great? Even famous professors and scholars eventually knew I was superior. And so the divine principle, I am the divine principle. So that's pretty narcissistic. I could get into narcissism later on. And so the other thing besides this narcissistic charismatic leader you got going on is they pick people who are authoritarian. Now, I used to think authoritarian means you like to boss people around, like this guy. No, authoritarian means you like to follow orders. So I always say this, if you're not authoritarian, don't go into the military because you're going to have to be told what to do. You know what I mean? People that are authoritarian do great in the military because they want to follow orders. And so the same thing, cult leaders don't just pick anybody. They pick people that come from, oh girl, he too thirsty, you're not my other class. But when you have this craving, because you come from a background where you didn't receive enough love, a broken family, this is what gangs are good at, picking people from if you come from a healthy family, you don't want to go and follow a cult, right? You go, why do these people do it? It's like, but people are starving to have a family, so that's a part of it. Okay, so look at Jonestown, eventually he deified himself, but under his direction, 909 people killed themselves. So you can see, they were ready to serve him in this crazy way. Okay, second one, in-group and out-group ties. I'll come back to Jim Jones. I call it cocooning. Why? Because you insulate the new recruit. My other class people are doing a project on this. So what does that mean? You hang out with us, we're the good people, and you stop hanging out with who you used to hang out with. Okay, and so this cocooning has two parts to it. You only hang out with the new group, that's the first part, and the second part, disconnect from the old group. Only hang out with the new group, sometimes it's called love bombing. This is why sometimes when I go to a new church, I never say I'm a new person. Same thing in an AA meeting. If you say, I'm a new person, it's like, you're fucked because they're going to love bomb you. They're all going to run over there and act like you're the most special person in the room. It's like, oh my God, we're so glad you're here. And that's not bad, but that's one of the things they do in an exploitative way here, It's a deceptive ploy where it's like, oh, it's not verbal, sexual, but it's a lots of attention to every remark. Oh my God, you're so amazing. You know what I mean? And so this is exactly what thirsty people want. So this is perfect symbiotic relationship for thirsty people. Now, if I can get off of this, the second part is disconnection. So you got love bombing, 1 and 2, two parts of cocooning. And so if you think about going to an AA meeting or a church, I just mentioned this, it's like, especially in AA, don't hang out with normies. You need to hang out with all the alcoholics that are in recovery. You know what I mean? It's like hang out at AA meetings all the time. Only hang out with people in AA. Don't hang out with non-AA people. Same thing at church might start to happen. So if you were in my other class doing this project, I get them to look at how different groups disconnect you and love bomb you. But look at this right here with David Koresh. Everyone was forced to rely on him. Why? Because you were in the compound, and well, I was near Waco when it all happened, but he isolated people. It was like a military compound. You couldn't leave. And so for 8 hours a day, you're just stuck there listening to lectures from him, but you're stuck there all the time because you live there nonstop. And he wouldn't allow any communication to your family. Disconnect you. Disconnection, Scientology are the geniuses behind this because they disconnect people. So they even have this word, and there's billboards, on the West Coast and stuff about this, where if you leave Scientology, you never get to talk to your kids, your family, whatever else, because you're now a part of the out group. Okay, so the third tactic. While this talk about the charismatic leader and also cocooning, well, once you get this charismatic leader and he cocoons people, he can control all the information they received. You saw that in the data. So I talk about information sampling in my other class. These little eyes, oh, I don't have my thing, are pieces of information. So in the world, there's all this information. Think about the internet that you could surf. And so usually I only focus on a certain amount at a time. Here, I'll get this off of here. Get off of here. And that's, my limited attentional capacity. In my other classes, I go off on this. But let me see if I can get my clicker to work here. What I talk about is selective attention, that I get to choose the information. For instance, I'm going to focus on this piece right here and not focus on these pieces over here. So I get to choose this. But in a cult setting, what happens is instead of me choosing right here, then the cult leader chooses. And so he filters out some of this information that he doesn't want you to hear and only focuses on certain information over here. And therefore, it's formation. I want to go back to the Catholic example, RCIA, formation. I'm forming. I always say, you're going to get formed somewhere. I'm trying to form you too with my thoughts. And so, Pratt-Connis and Aronson, if you look at this, what do? You don't have to write any of this down. You bombard them with sermons. David Koresh would do sermons like 7 or 8 hours in a row. It's like, I don't want to listen to even Jesus for 7 or 8 hours in a row. And so, and then, if you think about this, oh, I have a special relationship. This is fundamentalism on steroids, and I'm going to censor all communication with the outside world. Now, George Orwell says, if also there's these evil forces we're always at war with that comes from fundamentalism, then okay, I'll give all my power to you because we got to beat the evil forces. This is like, the whole war on terrorism and everything else. It's great in a way for the government because then we always have evil opposition out there. I don't want to go 1984 right now, but you know who I am. Okay, so the availability heuristic, I want you to remember this for sure. I teach this in my social psychology class. And so it's basically what's available in your head. If I ask you a question, what's the first thing that pops to your mind? And so on a test, a lot of times you think, oh, it's correct because it came into my head right away. And so this is considered to be truth, the first thing that pops into your head. Okay, well, normally I kind of have a lot of free will over what pops into my head. But if I'm in one of these cocoon settings where someone's controlling all this information, what do you think's going to pop into my head? Whatever dum-dum's been over there telling me all day long. And so instead of me picking it, there's this informational influence. And not only is it the cult leader, but the other bees within the cult are saying the same thing. They're all reiterating the same exact stuff. I just downloaded this new thing on because I have a new TV on Amazon Prime about all these weird satanic cults and everything else. I can't wait to watch it because all these people get convinced. It's like there's this one about vampires. They were all convinced that they were vampires. Okay, so we create these social realities because all of us and all the other bees are saying the same thing. This is what George Orwell says. Sorry about the 1984. He says reality does exist in the human mind. I can't get my pen to write, but not in the individual's mind. It makes mistakes. The only thing that is true is the party. It is impossible to see reality except by looking through the eyes of the party. And so when I talk about the party here, oh, Joseph Goebbels, he was in charge of all the propaganda for Nazi Germany. If you tell a lie big enough and keep repeating it, people will eventually come to believe it. That's all I need to say. End of the story, mic drop, because that's what cults do. They just tell a lie over and over and over, and then people come to believe it. Okay, so I've got a couple of examples of how people believe false prophets, and you start to, they control information and they start to form or guide, their members' belief systems. Well, Charles Manson, he believed that the Beatles were 4 angels. Okay, I like the Beatles a lot, but I don't know if they were angels. He literally believed that they were angels. They were sending him messages, especially on the White Album, but I don't have my pen on here. And the White Album is very trippy. Now, what kind of messages were they sending him? Well, I'm going to show some stuff on Blackbird, Piggies, I think Helter Skelter, Revolution, number 9. The White Album is really freaky. But he really believed in a schizophrenic way that the Beatles, who were angels, were sending him these messages. What were the messages? Well, revolution. The revolution, what is that? That in the song Blackbird, since it was black, that black people were supposed to arise and revolt against the white establishment. My problem with that is he's white, but Rise was written, on the La Bianca home. I think that's on the next slide, but also on the La Bianca home. You can't see it here. Death to pigs, piggies. They need a good whacking. And so what he thought is when Sharon Tate and her unborn child were murdered in the La Bianca, since it was, rich, fancy people, that this would start this revolution or race war between the whites and the blacks, and that he would rise to the top. Now, you can see Helter Skelter was written on the refrigerator, And also honey pie. This is my favorite part. Manson interpreted the line "I'm in love but I'm lazy" to mean that the Beatles love Jesus Christ, and he's in Southern California, but they're too lazy to search for him. And he's Charles Manson. God help us if Jesus is Charles Manson. Okay, so my second example is Heaven's Gate. I love this one because this guy is so kooky. Marshall Applewhite. Now, what did he convince people of? He's a false prophet. Again, he cocooned people. He had them in this close, tight-knit society in Rancho Santa Fe, California, and eventually all 38 of them killed themselves. They drank poison Kool-Aid or whatever. Now, why did they drink the poison Kool-Aid? Because he had convinced them that their bodies would rise and get on a spaceship that was getting driven by Jesus, and he would drive them to this galaxy, if I can get my clicker to work here, known as heaven. Okay, you know what I mean? I have no idea, if I can believe in that kind of a nonsense. But this, really illustrates when you have this tight-knit society, you have this charismatic leader, all the information's controlled, everybody's saying the same thing. You can have this very, very extreme outcome. Speaking of extreme outcomes, Scientology to me is totally a cult because what do they believe in? This auditing crap right here, where they're going to clear you. And why do you need to be cleared? Because like 20 million years ago, Xenu had to like place these thetans on Earth, and like, we're, I guess, the descendants of all this, and we need to be cleared, and it has to do with alien. I'm going, as soon as you bring aliens into your religion, I'm just out of here. You know what I mean? But you have these tight-knit societies, and the information is controlled. And some of the people in my other class, if you were in my social class, are doing this as their project. So I don't want to, go off on it right now. But I definitely talk more about this in my social psychology class. Sometimes I think everything is a cult, because it's all formation. It doesn't matter. Like there's all these little cults in America, and what do? We isolate ourselves and say my cult is better than yours, and we all just like believe the same thing, and then the people down the street are doing the same thing. And so this is why I'm a social psychologist, because I definitely believe in this idea of formation, and whoever's your prophet, some people are going to say that's the false prophet. Okay, we got two more tactics that cults use. The fourth tactic is really straightforward. That's severe initiations. You usually have to do something extreme. I'm showing this thing because I got it off a taboo. Like this is the alligator people. What do? They cut these little marks into the people right here all over their back. And as you become a man, this is the rite of manhood. And then they rub dirt in them, and then it makes all these scars over their body, and they look like alligators. It's really extreme. So Aronson and Mills, 1959 is what it says right over here. They started to look at initiations, and what did they find? They found that people that receive more severe initiations like the group more. If you have a weak initiation, it seems like, okay, the group is not really worth it, but a severe initiation, I guess it makes the group worth it in some ways. Now, here's their data. You don't have to remember this, but, as you go up and up and up, you like the group more and more and more, the more severe the initiation gets. Think about fraternities and hazing. Think about the military. Think about gangs. Okay, so one of the things that should happen here is I don't want to do this thing. This goes back to, I think I talked about dissonance in this class, but I did it. Think about the fraternity. I don't want to do that stuff, like dress up like a girl or something like this, but I'm going to do it because I want to be in the group. And so there's this duality, there's this dissonance. I did it, but I didn't want to do it. Okay, so effort justification is what I use as one of the theories of why the severe initiations promote more loyalty within groups. Well, why would I do it if the group wasn't worth it? And so when I have this duality, I did that thing, but I didn't want to do it. Then I go, yeah, but the group's worth it. And now I'm in the group and see it was all worth it. And so that's effort justification. Sometimes I use this with relationships. You've been in a relationship 10 years and go, well, I guess it's worth it because I put a lot of effort into it. And it's like, yeah, but sometimes you need to get out of it. Okay, so you reduce your dissonance. Dissonance is uncomfortable anxiety by rationalizing the sacrifice. It was worth it. This is from Sundance. They hook these hooks into these guys and then they string them up for days in the sun and then they rip them out of there. It's like, I don't want to have those hooks into my flesh, but that's a right of manhood, you know? And so if you think about rights of manhood, I'm big on rights of manhood, even though I'm a big old sissy, because I think that men need this, like the crucible, 54 hours, 48 miles, 48 pounds a year, or 45 pounds a year. You have 4 MREs to eat. You have to do all this crap. Think about Navy SEALs. They really get pounded too. And then later on, Semper Fi means something. Semper Fi has loyalty in the word, fidelis. Okay, and so this is what, Aronson and Mills are talking about. So what do the cults do? You don't have to remember all this, but Charles Manson, as soon as you go into the cult, he's going to make you get all hopped up on an LSD and get into an orgy and do all kinds of crazy stuff. Well, if you're an innocent, you're never going to be the same person because you've done this stuff. He knew it. He would break you right away. Think about gangs. They beat you. They make you go commit armed robbery or a drive-by shooting to get into the gang. Sometimes you have to go cut somebody or rape somebody just to get into the gang. I don't know if you watch Gangland, but it's a good show that they used to have, I think, on the History Channel. So don't have to remember any of this, but look at the MS-13s. There's plenty of soft targets out there. So here's a pistol and go find one. Or the other thing, you have to slash a stranger's face with a razor. So go find somebody. It's like Hell's Angels is like terrible. Once you get your colors, they put all this crap literally on you and you have to fight almost to the death to keep your jacket. And then your jacket's got all that crap on it. Okay, so this is part of it. As you get into a call, one of the things that happens is they make you do something and then you have to look at yourself in the mirror and go, why did I do that? Sometimes they escalate it up. That's why I have this on here, and that's the 5th one. And so self-perception theory says that a weird thing. We watch our behavior and then we figure out who we are. Most people think I know who Tim is, and then it guides my behavior, and that's a reflection of Tim's character. But in this case, a lot of times you watch your behavior and say, I must be like that. And in my social class, I talk about how I became a recycler. I didn't want to, but I kept getting fined in my neighborhood. So eventually I got real OCD about it. And then later on, years later, I'm finding myself being OCD about recycling. And it's like, why? I guess I'm a recycler because I had to do it. And the same thing on steroids and cults. I have to do this thing, and now I can never be the same person. And many times they change their names. Think about gangs. They have a nickname. Eminem's not Eminem's name. It's Marshall Mathers. 50 Cent's not 50 Cent's name. You know what I mean? It's like you have all these, gangsters, and I like a lot of gang rap, if you can't tell. But sometimes you change the way you dress, change what you eat, everything else, because you become a new person. Okay, guys, the last tactic is called escalation of commitment. Gonna focus on this word escalation because you ask for a small favor, then a bigger one, then a bigger one, then a bigger one. You escalate and get people to do bigger and bigger things for you. So I'm going to talk about the foot in the door technique. Hopefully you can see this, but the foot in the door technique is an escalation technique, and this is how it goes. What do? You first ask for a small favor, and then you ask for a bigger favor. You don't want the small favor, you want the bigger favor, and so I can stack these favors too. So what do? This is the target favor over here. In 1966, Friedman and Fraser tried to go around to neighborhoods and get them to put up this huge sign in their front yard that says drive carefully. Most people don't want to do it. That's a big favor in their study, at least. Now, in some conditions, in the foot in the door, a week earlier, they had asked people, will you put this little sticker in your window that says safe driver? And a lot of the people did this in this condition. So what happens? If you look at this small favor, you would think, oh, it has no, bearing on a week later when they say, will you come and put this sign in the yard? But it does. Here's the results of the study. In the control condition, when I ask you to put the sign in your front yard, 83% of the people say, hell no. But in this foot in the door condition, a week later, 3 out of 4 people will put this sign in their front yard. Now, the idea is that they want to stay consistent in this condition. There's other theories about it too, but one of the best theories is like I look at my past behavior and now I look at them asking me to keep escalating about this drive carefully campaign. And whether it's guilt or I feel like I've committed, whatever it is, I do the bigger favor. Now, like I said, you can stack these until you get bigger and bigger. If I have this on here, I can't remember if I do. Adolf Hitler, he didn't ask you to go down to Auschwitz and start, killing Jewish people right on day one. You joined, whatever, the young Nazi groups, the youth groups, and worked your way up to some of the bigger favors. David Koresh, same thing, he worked people up. And the best example is Marshall Applewhite, because you worked your way up. You didn't ask on day one, will you drink this Kool-Aid and kill yourself? You worked your way up to the, okay, we're going to heaven and meet Jesus. And as far as escalation, there's no better example than knucklehead right here, Jim Jones, who killed 908 people. He didn't ask you on day one, will you kill you and your babies? On day one, he would be in San Francisco and be sitting at a table, and if he would see you passing by and say, hey, would you help me fold letters? Most people say no, but thirsty people might not say no. And so then if you did fold letters, he would say, hey, would you come out and help out at the church? It's like you were really great at doing this. And people want that sense of community. They would come by. It was very international. He had all kinds of people, white, black, straight, gay, this, that, the other. So it seemed really, really great. And then eventually ask everybody to give up their personal belongings to the church, because Christianity and, God is about communism, about taking care of our brothers and sisters. So it's like, okay, that makes sense. Then eventually he says, well, America doesn't like us in communism. We're going to move down to Guyana and we're going to start Jonestown. Now you're getting bigger and bigger favors, but you're so far in recycling. You know what I mean? The way it gets started, you get bigger and bigger and bigger. AA does this, the military does this, all kinds of people do this. And so eventually you would have to engage in some weird sexual request, and then eventually he asks you, will you drink the poison flavor aid? He actually had 2 test runs, and then the third one was when he had him do it, and he didn't even do it himself. And so he escalated people, and you see this with these deified charismatic leaders. They escalate people into these extreme behaviors, and I think once the people buy in, whether it's cognitive dissonance or whether it's commitment and effort justification, whatever it is, these people go all the way to the bitter end.